Facebook is wanting to launch its own internet service, and actually they kind of have already. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. The show we talk about technology and more. So Facebook's free web internet.org program has now expanded into Indonesia, a country with a 250 million population, making its second largest launch in Asia to date. Now, internet.org is the new sort of internet service provider that is founded in part by Mark Zuckerberg, and it's sort of the brainchild of his. So internet.org landed in India back in February, but came under some pressure in the country this past week after net neutrality became a national topic, following concerns around the launch of operators Airtel's zero rating platform for app developers. So some connectivity is definitely better than none, says Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg in response to the debate over in India, which has seen some initial content partners drop out. And it's business as usual for Facebook's led initiative, which first dipped its toes into Southeast Asia when it went live in the Philippines last month. So for maybe you don't know about internet.org, and actually a lot of people don't, it's not something that's widely reported. Internet.org is a free portal of hand-picked internet services that can be accessed for free by users on mobile devices. Facebook's argument is that this is a natural stepping stone for those who can't connect to the internet for financial or other reasons, which is actually a lot of people, because the internet is still a little bit pricey for the higher end bit rates. So if we're talking about, say, 500 megabits per second, that's really fast, and that's going to cost you a lot of money. So the company argues that it is a first bite that could give millions of people genuine reasons to upgrade to a data plan to get the full-blown internet experience. The contrary take to that is that Facebook is creating a separate internet, and by hand-selecting internet.org partners, is discriminating against other companies which are not on its list. If a rival service is on the internet.org portal, for example, its competitors are disadvantaged because of Facebook and internet.org's gatekeeping and potential reach. So, for instance, back in the day, you wouldn't have seen MySpace on Facebook's internet.org. You just wouldn't, because why in the world would you? You probably won't see Google in some form on internet.org and all these other problems. So you can see where the complaint is coming from. But again, it is a private service that's being launched by Facebook, so it's not like you can say that Facebook is trying to subvert the internet as it is and all that sort of thing. And anyway, who's to say that the internet should remain a unified thing anyway? So in all the markets that we operate in, he says, we are passionate about the benefits of connectivity and are always exploring new ways to help bring more people into the digital economy. This partnership will contribute to bringing more of Indonesia's communities online and help people to achieve their aspirations for a better tomorrow, says Dr. Nasser Marafi, Group CEO of Ooredoo, which owns Indosat, Internet.org's telecom partner over in Indonesia, in a statement. Internet.org was actually announced all the way back in 2013, but the debate is only kicking up now. It will be interesting to see, of course, how the program is received in Indonesia and in other different markets around the world. Now, you may notice, though, that people are having some concerns about this being a separate internet from the already established internet. That's an interesting idea. Let's break that down. What if there was now a separate internet from the regular old internet that we all know and love? We're all familiar with the internet as it is now. We use it every day. I'm broadcasting to you over the internet, actually. If you're listening on hotnewstalkradio.com, then you're listening to me on the internet over hotnewstalkradio.com. So the internet is not a foreign thing, but a separate form of internet. Wouldn't that sort of undermine the already established internet? Well, possibly, but is that such a bad thing? What if this new internet is actually better? Now, what if there were a bunch of separate internets that could all be accessed from the same device and that sort of thing? I mean, again, who's to say that the internet must remain a unified platform? There's really no reason for that when you come to think of it, because if you can access it from all these different devices, there's not really any reason for it to be a unified platform in the sense that everything exists over the same network. Why not have a sort of a disconnect from one network to the next to compartmentalize different services, you might say. Now, that's not to say that you won't be able to access this internet from your service provider. You won't be able to access that internet from your service provider. But what would be interesting if there was a sort of disconnect between different networks, so it's more compartmentalized. And it's possible, but it's kind of unlikely the way things are going. Now, another interesting idea that I've heard kicked around a bit is the low orbit or low Earth orbit satellites delivering internet. That's probably the better option for a lot of people, especially in rural areas. It's employing a system that is not foreign at all. It's just 4G LTE that's being bumped against a bunch of different low Earth orbit satellites. In this case, drones, and it's being rebroadcast sort of from drone to drone to drone. And you pick it up on your phone or on your laptop, so you have wireless internet that's actually really fast. Now, this is not something that's going to be launched tomorrow. It could be actually launched tomorrow if there wasn't FAA regulations on commercial usage of drones. It probably could be launched tomorrow. But unfortunately, there's a bunch of different regulations and regulatory hurdles you have to go through before we're going to be seeing any sort of internet via drone. But that doesn't mean that we should discount this immediately, because we probably will be seeing some form of internet being delivered to us via drone or some other form of in-air device, whatever that may end up being. So that's a very exciting idea for people who live in rural areas which don't have access to the regular luxuries of having cable internet delivered straight to your house. Because, say, in a more mountainous area over in Dunlap, you're not necessarily going to be able to get that. So the best option would be this new wireless internet. Well, that also means that you'd have high-speed connectivity pretty much anywhere you go, so long as you're within range of these low Earth orbit satellites. So the idea would be that there's these drones flying around, and you probably wouldn't even see them. They'd be so high up. These drones flying around, delivering 4G or 5G or whatever the standard they decide to go for, internet down to your wireless device. So this means then that you could have households which don't even have Ethernet cables going around the house. They just have a router or a modem, and it broadcasts the wireless signal to the different devices. And you have your own personal router, and it's just a wireless router, and that's it. There's not even any wired connectivity going around. Now, that's not really feasible now because wireless internet still isn't as fast as Ethernet, but in the future, it very well could be. So I'm very, very excited to see what's going to go on with the future of wireless internet. It could be something that's way different from even what we're hypothesizing about right now, because there's just no way of knowing at this point. Well, internet piracy is something that gets the MPAA riled up. And what's the MPAA? It's the Motion Picture Association of America. Let me say that again. The Motion Picture Association of America. Now, the MPAA gets very upset when you pirate a movie. And their reasoning is that people aren't getting money and that sort of thing. They're not getting proper royalties and yada, yada. So if you pirate a movie that's been out for 10 years, somebody's not getting paid somehow, I guess is their argument. Now, the RIAA is almost as bad. That's the Recording Industry Association of America. And the RIAA really hates it when you download music off of a non-standard platform, or off a platform that's not pre-approved by the RIAA. So basically, if you don't download music from Bandcamp or from iTunes or from the Google Play Store, then the RIAA hates you. Well, you remember the Sony emails that got leaked back in the days when people were saying that it was the North Korean hackers who hacked into Sony, and that story has since been dropped because it's ridiculous, even though people jumped on it and said that this may have been an act of war, and people were very excited, hoping that there might be a war coming soon, but fortunately that turned out to not be the case. Well, anyway, the leaked Sony emails have shown the MPAA's opposition to fair use, and it actually confirms that users are in fact viewed as thieves. So yesterday, WikiLeaks announced that it had compiled a searchable archive of the emails that leaked from Sony last fall. The story comes from Extreme Tech. That effort is already bearing fruit now. We've been seeing quite a few very strange emails going around in the internal Sony email network. Now, what happened, to recap, is Sony had their internal email system hacked into. And so we got a bunch of emails from Martin Scorsese, the CEO of Sony Entertainment, all sorts of different things. We found out what Quentin Tarantino's personal email was, and it was an AOL.com address, and all sorts of cool stuff. We found out what Jennifer Lawrence's email was. I'm sure she's changed it by now. And it was a really stupid name, too. So we found out quite a few different things from the Sony leaks. But something else we gleaned from it is how poorly their ideas are run. And that's not really the right way to say it. How poor their idea machine is would be a better way to say it. How totally creatively bankrupt they are. And also how they really, really like the MPAA, and how the MPAA really, really doesn't like us. So this new archive has been thoughtfully provided to us by WikiLeaks, and it's a searchable archive, and you can search through all the different emails and such. So the fair use problem. According to the MPAA's official statements on the topic, the organization is firmly in favor of the fair use doctrine. Attempts to paint the situation otherwise can't possibly survive even a casual encounter with the facts, says the MPAA's website. Well, no thinking person is for or against fair use in all circumstances, as the Supreme Court and countless others have said. Fair use is a flexible doctrine, one that requires a case-by-case examination of the facts and a careful weighing of all the statutory factors. So the idea behind fair use would be, let's say you have a copyrighted piece of work, say a movie, and for educational purposes, I can use that movie in my classroom, or for journalistic purposes, I can use a scene of that movie in the making of a documentary or in a news piece or whatever. Now, so long as I give proper credit and say, this is where it comes from and all that sort of thing. For instance, Spider-Man, the motion picture is copyright Sony Pictures 2015, that sort of thing. So that's the basic idea that they're going for, and it's pretty simple, actually. Fair use basically means that you can use certain things for educational or journalistic purposes without being sued, and you can argue fair use. Now, this is not the same sort of fair use as the fair use you see on YouTube when people will just straight up post a Metallica music video and say, well, fair use says that blah, 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 blah. That's not how it works. Now, am I against them posting the video online? No, I really don't care. That's Metallica's battle to fight, and Metallica is actually very, very obnoxious about their copyright. So take from that what you will. But the point of the matter is, I really don't care about internet piracy. It doesn't bother me one bit. The tone of the MPA's public piece is unambiguous. The organization may disagree with others about whether certain uses of content are or are not fair use, but as a concept, they do support it. This makes the email, which was sent between Chris Dodd and Ambassador Froman, who's head of the United States Trade Representative, particularly interesting. And Extreme Tech has reposted the relevant paragraphs, and I'll read you some of them. One of which here says that I am concerned about your suggestion that previous free trade agreements copyright provisions were unbalanced, and that USTR has addressed this lack of balance by including fair use in the Trans-Pacific Pipeline, saying, as far as I know you are aware, the inclusion of fair use in free trade agreements is extremely controversial and divisive. The creative community has been and remains a strong, consistent supporter of free trade, but the potential export of fair use via these trade agreements raises serious concerns within the community which I represent, he says. So it seems that they like fair use in name only when it comes to copyright law. So according to Chris Dodd, the head of the MPAA, the discussion of fair use at a session of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Treaty is extremely controversial and divisive. The head of the MPAA also feels no particular regret at telling a high-level U.S. representative that he'd best get in touch pronto, despite currently being en route to Singapore at the time the letter was sent. The very idea that the U.S. might export its fair trade rules and laws is sufficiently worrying that Dodd has to yank Froman's leash, reminding him who the real sheriff is around these parts, according to the Extreme Tech article. So it seems the MPAA has quite a bit of pull within Congress. Now, that's a little bit odd considering that the MPAA actually isn't an official entity. They're more of a non-profit, private sort of thing. The MPAA is not a legally enforceable thing. A lot of people think that it is. By that, I mean, if you go to a movie that's rated R and you're under the age of 17, you've broken no law. that's not a crime. People, for some reason, think that that's a crime. It's not. You can go to a movie that's rated R if you're 13. It's fine. Just like you can be shown a movie that's rated R in your own house if you're 13. I watched The Last of the Mohicans when I was 10 or 12 years old, and that's a R-rated movie. Now, if that was a crime, then if a policeman walked by and saw that Last of the Mohicans was playing on my mom's TV, and I'm sitting there watching it, thoroughly enjoying it as it's a very interesting historical movie, he would kick down the door and say, you're under arrest for breaking MPAA code such and such and such. And I'd be thrown in jail, and my mom would be thrown in jail, and probably my dad too, and my baby sister would have been thrown in jail, and it would have been a horrible situation. So you can see why it's kind of a good thing that the MPAA regulations are not legally enforceable. It's just guidelines that movie companies are expected to follow. You don't have to have your movie rated. Now, a lot of theaters won't take movies which aren't rated for showing during daytime, and a lot of theaters have an actual company policy about letting people into the theater to an R-rated movie. But other than that, it's not a legally enforceable thing. It's all about company policy. For instance, if, say, let's say I'm 16. I'm not, but let's say I am. And I go into the movie theater and I say, hey, one for, what's a movie that's rated R that's playing right now? I can't think of one. One for Deadpool, please. And they give me my ticket, and then later on it's been determined that I was actually 13. They didn't card me or whatever. They're not going to get any legal trouble. It's just going to be a managerial hiccup, and somebody might not get a pay raise next week. And that's as far as it's going to go. It's not a legal thing. It's not a big deal even. Or for some reason, a lot of people think that it is. It's not. It's not legal. Don't worry about it. In fact, there's a lot of loopholes, actually. Different companies have different policies and that sort of thing. Carmike has very strange policies. But anyway, that's the gist of it. The MPAA is not a legally enforceable thing. Their regulations are not legally enforceable. You can't be kicked out for going into a movie that's more mature than you are, and you can't be arrested for it. Now, the theater can kick you out, but you can't be arrested for doing it because it's not a crime. But anyway, so what does the movie content industry think of the end user is now the question. The end user would be you and I. I'm an end user. You're an end user. We're all end users. Hey, so there are a number of little gems in the email and the document archive. One of the Writing the Article's favorites is a security analysis of the threats over-the-top content distribution systems posed to what it calls the digital entertainment content ecosystem. The report was written by NDS, which owns VideoGuard, a digital encryption system used in digital satellites, Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Sling TV. So what the document contains is a paragraph called, "What are hackers looking for?" The first paragraph reads, "In order to design or evaluate DRM technology, especially when it's running on open devices, it's very important," they say, "it's very important to define who will be the most probable and most dangerous adversary. The most anticipated potential adversary will be an authorized legitimate user of the service, and the weakest device will be chosen to perform an attack on." So that means then, to break this down and get it out of tech speak, what this means is that when they're worried about hackers hacking into Netflix or into Amazon Prime or whatever, they're actually worried more about you or I, the people who have paid for Netflix and Amazon Prime, or whose parents have, and they're more worried about us than they are about some guy who's just deciding to hack the system. So that means then that the MPAA puts higher scrutiny on the users of its own service, its own services or service partners, than it does anyone else who may pose a threat. So they expect companies like Netflix to treat us like we're potential criminals. This is a common climate that we're seeing here, though, in the United States. Have you noticed that? How there's this common climate where people are expected to think that anybody could potentially be doing something wrong at any point in time, instead of assuming that nothing wrong is happening. We keep having that system in place where, especially in the police, I would say, you keep seeing this climate where you might be doing something illegal. It's like, well, yeah, I might be, big deal. Yeah, that's true. I might do something illegal. I might do something which is a crime. Congratulations. You have the learning process of a 3-year-old. You can figure out that I might do something. This doesn't take any detective work or deductive reasoning or anything like that. This is an easy to make statement about anything. And it's a really great excuse to rifle through your stuff too, right? So you might be an illegal immigrant, or you might be a domestic terrorist. You might be a member of Al-Qaeda. I don't know. My next door neighbor might be a member of Al-Qaeda. We're creating a very paranoid culture where people are actually afraid of just walking down the street because of who might be doing one thing or another. It doesn't really matter. It shouldn't matter anyway to the police or to anyone else what might happen, because what matters is what has happened after it's happened, because it's not the duty of the police to prevent crimes from happening. It's not the duty of any agency to prevent crimes from happening, because that's impossible. A great movie about that, though, is Minority Report with Tom Cruise. You should definitely watch it because it is a good movie, and I think that's what they're trying to go for here.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better than new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great, supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
NASCAR, Laura Ingram, Dennis Miller, David Toulis, Coast to Coast AM, and CBS Radio News. Chattanooga's news, talk, and sports leader.
Hot News Talk Radio, 910, 1190, and 1240 AM.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240. Hot News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. 6 Minnesota men charged with conspiring to support terrorism with plans to join ISIS. U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger.
They were not confused young men. They were not easily influenced. These are focused men who are intent on joining a terrorist organization by any means possible.
Authorities say the men wanted to fly from San Diego and New York to countries near Syria. As many as 650 believed killed when that boat carrying Libyan migrants capsized in the Mediterranean. Now there's more trouble at sea.
Italy says it's responding to distress calls from another 2 boats carrying 400 people, while just off Greece, a few hundred miles from here, a boat carrying migrants running aground, killing 3.
Fox Radio's Simon Owen in Sicily. Congressional negotiators meeting today to start ironing out a GOP budget blueprint. One part of it would call for repeal of the president's health care law. Fox News, we report, you decide.
The FBI is conducting rather scary operations against the American public. Now, that's not anything that should surprise you. If there's anything I know, it's that the FBI really likes to spy on people. So this comes as no surprise whatsoever to a lot of people to learn that the FBI is quite a fan of spying on our everyday activities and then trying to cover it up. Well, what if there was a criminal case against somebody who had been spied on, and when the prosecution, or rather the defense, tried to bring up the fact that this person had been spied on using, say, a Stingray device, the FBI tried to drop the case? That's exactly what happened, actually. The FBI can't cut internet and pose as a cable guy either, and that's another story that we're going to get to here on Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're the show we talk about technology and more. Sorry, I had an alert pop up on my phone and ruin everything. So the FBI is really, really good, actually, at what some might call black bag operations. Now, a black bag operation is a very nefarious sort of thing where somebody is basically breaks into your house and rifles through your belongings and then leaves. And they work in an official capacity. And that's a black bag operation. There's all sorts of different operations that can be done, but a lot of people have heard of the black bag, and that's sort of why I bring it up. Well, it looks like something similar may have happened. So the FBI actually cut off somebody's internet and then posed as a cable person to inspect the house to find out what the source of the problem was. So a federal judge, according to Ars Technica, has issued a stern rebuke on Friday to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's method for breaking up an illegal online betting ring. Now, there's no greater threat to the homeland than online betting. A lot of people don't actually know that, but online betting is possibly one of the most threatening things that can ever happen. A lot of people just don't realize that, and it's shocking to me that people don't realize just how harmful it is when somebody decides to spend their own money and wager their own money in a private game. That's incredibly dangerous, and it's astounding how little regard people give to that. Oh, wait, it's because nobody cares. But for some reason, the FBI does. Why? Oh, well, it's kind of obvious, actually. They're not getting any tax money out of it. So a federal judge has issued a pretty stern rebuke. The Las Vegas court frowned upon the FBI's ruse of disconnecting the internet access to a $25,000 per night villa at Caesars Palace Hotel and Casino. FBI agents then posed as the cable guy and secretly searched the premises. The government claimed that the search was legal because the suspects invited the agents into the room to fix the internet. The problem is that they didn't know these people were FBI agents, so it seems to be a little bit suspicious whether or not consent was given. A U.S. District Judge Andrew P. Gordon isn't buying it. He ruled that if the government could get away with such tactics like those that they used to nab gambling kingpin Paul Foy and some of his associates, then the government would have a carte blanche power to search just about any property ever. Because then that would mean that they could pose as the guy to fix my broken washing machine, and then they could just break into the house and search through all my belongings because I invited them in to fix my washing machine because I ordered for a washing machine to be fixed. You see what kind of dangerous climate this creates. Well, the government claimed that it was legal because they invited them in. It's kind of like a vampire can only enter your house if you invite them in. Permitting the government to create the need for an occupant to invite a third party into his or her home would effectively allow the government to conduct warrantless searches of the vast majority of residents in hotel rooms in America, Gordon wrote, throwing out evidence the agents collected. Authorities would need only to disrupt phone, internet, cable, or other non-essential service, and then pose as technicians to gain warrantless entry to the vast majority of homes, hotel rooms, and similarly protected premises across America. So you see the problem. What if, for instance, you're staying in a hotel room and the FBI suspects that you may be some form of domestic terrorist who has highly extremist ideas about about how one thing or another should be run? You know, you have fairly extremist ideas about maybe the IRS. You know, very extreme ideas about the IRS. How dare you? So you go to a hotel room because you're going to an anti-IRS conference, perhaps, and at this conference, your hotel room it gets broken into, but it's not really broken into because you allowed the person in. It's housekeeping. They knock on your door and say, you know, housekeeping. And, oh yeah, come in, and then they do a say a visual search of your room because they're the FBI. Actually, you see what a dangerous idea this is. Well, in 1966, the Supreme Court authorized an agent to pose as a drug buyer to get consent to go inside a house. In 1980, an agent posing as a drug dealer's chauffeur was upheld. 7 years later, agents posed as real estate investors to access a bedroom and closet of a suspect. And in 1989, an agent posed as a UPS delivery man to get inside a drug house, the government argued. But all these things are it's just drugs. It's not like murder. It's just like cocaine being sold. And do you think that shutting down one cocaine operation is going to stop all of them? It's really not. There's no stopping it. It's just part of the pointless war on drugs that we keep hearing about. Well, operatives posing as gas company or water district workers seeking permission to enter the premises to check for leaks were deemed illegal searches. That's because the occupants provided involuntary consent to enter because they were duped into believing that a life-threatening emergency was afoot, says the defense. In his case, Foua's case, the FBI and the Nevada gaming official clandestinely filmed the rooms while building a case that ultimately accused Foua, his son, and others of running a World Cup soccer bookmaking ring where hundreds of millions of dollars in illegal bets were taking place. But why are these bets illegal? Why is this a crime? You know, what harm is done? It's not like anybody's being harmed by them deciding to make a wager. That's kind of what is so frightening to me, is that really nothing has happened to anyone other than somebody made a very poor decision with his or her money. That's the only wrongdoing that's occurred. So why then does the FBI care so much? Well, again, it's obvious, because it's tax money. They're not getting the tax money that they deem they are worthy of receiving. So in order to disrupt the idea that you can do things without paying money to the man, they'll shut down these operations with very elaborate sting operations to show just what great lengths they're willing to go to stop you from circumventing the tax system. In the Foua case, the FBI and Nevada gaming official actually broke into their house pretending to be internet service provider technicians. The investigation started last summer when Caesars Palace staff got suspicious that the men were ordering substantial amounts of electronic gear and internet connections. The 7 other defendants reached plea deals, but Foua challenged the search on constitutional grounds. The court's decision likely ends the case against the 50-year-old Malaysian man. Thomas Goldstein, one of Foua's lawyers and one of the nation's top Supreme Court litigators who runs SCOTUS blog, chided that what he described as the government's misconduct. This is a monumental ruling in protecting Americans' privacy in the modern age, he said in a statement. And actually, it kind of is when you think about it, because a lot of people will sort of scoff and say, well, he was an illegal gambler, he got what he deserved. But he still has the same rights as you or I, regardless of him being an illegal gambler or whatever. I mean, honestly, who in the world cares if illegal gambling goes on? It seems that the only people who actually care that illegal gambling goes on are those who would profit off of legal gambling going on. It's kind of like in so many states where there's gambling, there's no lottery, and in so many states where there's lottery, there's no gambling. You see, it's a voluntary tax, actually, as some in Alabama described the lottery. So they want you to give as much money as you possibly can to the government. And lots of money is made off of the gambling industry, obviously. I mean, you think the casinos don't pay their taxes? Lots of money is to be made there. So that's why they're so up in arms about this idea that people are simply not paying taxes when they're gambling. You see, that's actually where the crime comes in, is in some states, I'm not sure if Tennessee is this way, but in some states, you can actually be just arrested straight up if you decide that, you know, I bet $5 that the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl, you know. You can actually be just thrown in jail for making that wager with 2 or more people. You see where the problem comes in, where it's a massively overzealous response on the side of the FBI. Now, does that mean gambling is right? No, I don't think gambling is right. But is that a matter for the FBI to arrest you and fine you thousands of dollars? No, it's really not. Well, the FBI is up to more of its old tricks with Stingray. Prosecutors have dropped a robbery case to preserve Stingray secrecy in St. Louis. Now, I'm not a huge fan of any federal agency or any police agency doing much of anything, but something that we can all agree on most likely is that arrests should be made in robbery cases and people should be brought to trial. That's just sort of a common idea that pretty much everyone is going to agree with. Well, unless, of course, that person was brought to so-called justice using an illegal means, you see. So prosecutors in St. Louis, Missouri, there we go, have seemingly allowed 4 robbery suspects to go free instead of explaining law enforcement's use of Stingray in court proceedings. Now, this is not the first time we've seen this happen. In fact, it's not even close to the first time we've seen this happen. This is a pretty common occurrence, actually, where somebody gets arrested on suspicion of doing something, and when prosecutor or defense wants to know, how did you get this information, the FBI will simply drop the case, because to answer that question, they would have to divulge that stingrays are being used. The St. Louis case provides yet another real-world example where prosecutors have preferred to drop charges instead of fully disclose how the devices, also known as cell site simulators, work in the real world. Last year, prosecutors in Baltimore did exactly the same thing during a robbery trial. According to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the dismissal this month came just one day before a St. Louis police officer was set to be deposed in the robbery case where 3 men and a woman were accused of stealing from 7 people in September of 2013. So now a person is potentially not being brought to justice for a legitimate crime. I mean, robbery is an actual crime. It's not like it's something silly like possession of marijuana or something ridiculous like illegal gambling under $5. It's not some silly thing that we can all agree is not really worth the police's time. We're talking about robbery here, where actual monetary loss happened on the side of another citizen. At least we can presume that. So according to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the dismissal came just a month ago. A month and 1 day, actually. So neither the office of the circuit attorney or Jennifer Joyce nor the office of Megan Beasley, a public defender involved in the case, immediately responded to any requests for comment over the weekend. The St. Louis Police Department also did not respond to any requests for comment. While the St. Louis newspaper did not name the suspects, it reported that an unnamed circuit attorney spokesman denied any connection between dismissal and the forthcoming deposition. So, according to court records, Detective John Anderson told defense attorneys that the cops had used a proven law enforcement technique, whatever that means, in order to locate one of the stolen phones and eventually the suspects. Anderson then refused to elaborate, citing a non-disclosure agreement that he and his agency were bound by. So, we're not talking about a non-disclosure agreement between a private citizen and a company because he's doing a beta test on some product and he doesn't want the person to talk about the trade secrets. No, we're talking about a non-disclosure agreement between a police agency and the Harris Corporation, most likely. Of course, we can't say that for certain because of the lack of papers and lack of evidence thereof, but we do know that the Harris Corporation will ask the police agencies to file non-disclosure agreements to prevent them from ever talking about how these Stingray devices work. So according to court records, Detective John Anderson would not talk about it, instead calling it a proven law enforcement technique, whatever that means. Now, that could be anything at all. A proven law enforcement technique is putting somebody in handcuffs. You can't just cite that as your methodology for arresting somebody. Of course it is. So the revelation strongly suggests that the St. Louis Police Department has an agreement along the lines of one which was recently revealed in a court case in Erie County, New York. And in that case, a rare, unredacted form, extremely rare, is the only time this ever happened that I'm aware of, demonstrated the full extent of the FBI's attempt to quash public disclosure of Stingray information. The most egregious example from the document showed that the FBI would prefer to drop a criminal case in order to protect the secrecy surrounding the Stingray device. So they hold the Stingray in a higher regard than they hold their idea of justice. And that's something which you'd think would be rather disturbing to quite a few people, and something which would be reported widely in all the different news outlets and all that sort of thing, but it's really not. Now, people will talk all the time about how, well, I watch this or that news channel because I know they're unbiased, or I'll watch, this or that news channel because I know they give the best idea of what the truth is. But I'm not sure how one can say that when a story such as this is just being totally ignored in much of the media. I mean, you're not even hearing about this on anywhere other than just online in different websites such as Ars Technica and Extreme Tech and The Verge. Different tech websites have been overzealous even in reporting on Stingray devices. But when it comes to what people might describe as a serious news source, we're not really hearing anything at all about Stingray. Now, why is that? Brandon Pavlich is one of the victims who was pistol whipped and needed 18 stitches when the Post-Dispatch, and he told the Post-Dispatch that he was shocked when prosecutors told him that legal charges were being dropped and explained that only legal issues had developed. So the paper continued in saying that in 2011, St. Louis police approached prosecutors in the court to work out procedures for using a loaner stingray, and the circuit court judge, Jack Garvey, who was part of the discussions, and he praised police and prosecutors for their efforts to find the appropriate way to authorize stingray use. The police mainly used the device to locate crime victims' cell phones with the owner's permission, Garvey explained. He said that he was familiar with the technology and signed administrative search warrants to authorize its use. So that might actually be a positive usage of stingrays. Now, it seems to me that the broader implications of stingray mean that they really shouldn't be used at all. But you can see the instances where you could argue that, that this is an okay way to use stingray devices. Because if we're talking about locating a stolen cell phone, where the owner of said stolen cell phone has given permission to find that cell phone using stingray technology, then I can see what's going on, and that actually does make sense. But if we're talking about spying on somebody who doesn't even know that it's happening, who might not even be any sort of criminal, that's really a big problem because there's no form of search warrant half the time being given out for these things. Well, in 2012, St. Louis police sought bids for their own Stingray Mark II, which is mounted in an SUV. It's not clear whether the purchase actually went through or not. Now, of course, something that's prominent about St. Louis is the recent protests which have been going on in Missouri. And so, of course, it would be in the police's best interest in order to get one of these things in order to monitor different cell phone communications to ensure that none of these protesters turn violent or none of these protesters is talking to the media in a subversive manner or whatever. The court orders used now in St. Louis require a lesser standard of evidence, and do not specifically mention cell site simulators, instead favoring the dense language saying 24-hour-a-day assistance to include switch-based solutions, including precision location pursuant to probable cause-based information queries and all reasonable assistance to promote the aforementioned agencies to triangulate target location, including but not limited to terminating interference service on the target telephone. What? You see, this is the very, very dense language which a lot of these agencies will use in order to keep you from knowing what's really going on. It makes things very confusing, and probably a judge will read all this block of text and say, okay, whatever, and just sign it. Because instead of saying a device which tracks cell phone communications, it's a 24-hour-a-day assistance to include switch-based solutions, including precision location pursuant, yada, yada. It goes on for a few more paragraphs. So instead of just calling it a cell site simulator as it is, they call it some weird, very descriptive description that's very precise in what the device actually is. It's like if you call a cash register a device through which money is transacted and calculated for purchases and for other transactions in order to keep track of different money orders and to ensure that money is properly transacted from buyer to seller and from seller to buyer in order that is fair and IRS approved, instead of just saying cash register. That's sort of what's happening here, where an incredibly dense language is being used to describe a very simple object. And it's actually effective. Hats off to the FBI, I guess. This is actually a very effective way of keeping people from knowing or caring what you're doing, is to just be so technical about it that people say, okay, whatever, and walk away. It's genius, actually. It's devious. It's evil genius tier. It's very scary, actually, coming to think of it. Well, what about private buses now? I mean, yeah, we can talk about Stingray all day, but what about the private industry? What's going on with the tech industry and the private sector? Bus systems are necessary for a lot of people's communications. We need bus systems. It could be argued that bus systems are a necessary facet of city infrastructure. But something to keep in mind is that a lot of bus systems are actually run by the municipalities. Now, you do have private companies, and rightly so, but a lot of these bus systems are actually run by the municipalities. Well, a private bus startup called Leap has been hit with a complaint under the U.S. disabilities law, which actually a lot of people argue in favor of the U.S. disabilities law. I can see faults with it, actually. The U.S. disabilities law has quite a few problems with it, I would argue. But Chris Pangilinan is let me make sure I get this. Pangilinan is a former San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency engineer who uses a wheelchair. And he has alleged that the new private bus startup called Leap is in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. As such, he has recently filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice. Now, instead of just contacting the company and saying, look, I ride a wheelchair, I was very disappointed to find out that your service couldn't be offered to me because of my wheelchair usage. Instead of just doing that, he went straight to the Department of Justice. So Leap recently launched its service offering interested commuters a luxury transit option that includes things like Wi-Fi, personal space, refreshments, and Leap charges riders $6 per fare, which is more than double what local buses charge. And riders use the company's smartphone app to pay for fare or refreshments, as well as to monitor when the buses are approaching. So you see, this is a very streamlined service that a municipality couldn't possibly hope to offer. Well, the Mr. Pangilinan, who moved away from San Francisco before Leap launched its service, said he found the company's lack of accessibility pretty shocking. His complaints allege that Leap removed features that made the buses previously wheelchair accessible, such as the front door ramp and wheelchair securement areas within the vehicle. If the Department of Justice finds that Leap is in violation, it could bring fines or even a civil lawsuit. The DOJ did not immediately, of course, respond to any request for comment, but Mr. Pangilinan said that, I don't want money or anything, he says. What I want is to make sure that the spirit and letter of the ADA is considered in the way that we build or change our transportation in the country. If services like Leap are going to become more popular, then it's harder to fight if we don't change it. I mean, there's a point to be made for catering to people who are in wheelchairs. I mean, obviously, if you're in a wheelchair, this shouldn't exclude you from any and all activities ever happening here in the States. That would be nonsense. You can't help that you're in a wheelchair. So there should be services to cater to people who are in wheelchairs, or regular old services should cater to people who are in wheelchairs. I mean, obviously, right? I'm not making that argument that people who are in wheelchairs are inferior and should never be catered to. That's ridiculous. People who are in wheelchairs can play in the free market just as a walking person may. Well, the problem, though, with the argument and the problem with the ADA is that it forces companies to abide by regulations that are actually kind of expensive to abide by. Keep in mind, we're talking about installing ramps, having specialized tables, having a I can't think of the proper word for it, but a handicap spot. I was wanting to say disabled, and I know that's frowned upon. My apologies. But a handicap spot for the bathrooms, all these different things. And it seems to me that these regulations really just get in the way of businesses. If a business wants to cater to somebody who's wheelchair bound, then by all means, but don't force them to do it. That's sort of the problem here, is that, say, Walmart's not going to suddenly cease catering to people who are in wheelchairs because the Americans with Disabilities Act has disappeared. That's not going to happen. That would be nonsense. Obviously, they have a vested interest in providing services to these people. So it seems quite obvious that the Americans with Disabilities Act just sort of enforces extra regulations that aren't really necessary.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble, just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
You do not have to be living with constant pain. You need to make the choice today to enjoy a revitalized body. You deserve to live a better pain-free life. And Dr. Ross can help. At Ross Chiropractic, failure is not an option. For over 40 years, Dr.